Guys doing? Welcome again to another episode of Under the Dome, where more interesting things happen before the show starts than I think during the show itself. We're gonna have to do a pre-show just so you people see what goes on right here.
When we release the box set of our first full season, we're gonna have studio outtakes on it.
The box set? Oh yeah, that'll be a big seller. I'll buy all 8 copies. Anyway. Welcome to an episode of Under the Dome. I'm Alan Ulrich, your host, and alongside my drinking partner here, Sean Williams. How you doing, Sean?
Here's to you, brother.
Oh my gosh.
Want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We have 2 very special guests that we're going to get to momentarily. Right after we the Bills, we want to thank. Wait a minute, I didn't write that down, did I? I want to thank Fan First Production. Hey, I haven't drank that much. Come on. It's been a long day. I went and had my blood pressure checked yesterday, and I don't know a lot about blood pressure, but they told me that when it reads 170, the top number, like mine did at my appointment yesterday, they said that's not good. So I have to go to another blood pressure doctor day after tomorrow. But anyway, getting back to the task at hand, we want to thank Fan First Productions for being our sponsor. We want to invite you guys to go and subscribe to us not only on YouTube but also on iTunes. The iTunes is, as Alan puts it, is a much more user friendly because it's not the video version; it's the audio only, so you don't have to look at us. You can just hear the silky sound of our voice. Real quickly, next week on our show, we're going to have one of our buddies to come back, Tyler Raymond, who writes now for That Dish, and he wrote a very cool article. I'm going to wait and let him tell you about that next week. But anybody out there that wants to know about this really cool article, hit me up. I'll be glad to share it with you.
He's got it
very close.
He's got it framed in his office. By the way, normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. So if you have 170, yeah, that's a little high.
Ooh, you're a little high there, Sean.
Yeah, well, I'm one of them hot-blooded machismo kind of guys.
Would it be by the same transactions?
Yeah. Okay, so we got.
Dad, and he said, so you better go to the doctor unless you want somebody else raising them kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to the doctor. Alan, I'll let you do the first intro there.
All right. Well, the first introduction is to a kid that some of you may or may not know. No, not a baby goat. My son, Matt, who's wearing a Jimmy Graham jersey. That's not mine. That's his. He's broadcasting from his apartment in beautiful downtown Lafayette across from Cajun Field. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Down in the daiquiri, doing fine.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Man after my own heart.
You and your sister are turning alcoholics. Terrific. I don't know where the hell that came from.
Well, you know.
Hey, I heard about your Mardi Gras float.
Yeah. Well, actually, when I rode, here's the thing, because it was the first time I ever rode in a parade, and I never finished one. No, I finished one beer. I barely finished the second. You're drinking beforehand because I'm too busy throwing stuff, and you don't have time to drink anything. So, you have to get trashed before the parade starts. That's how it works.
Oh, hey, as long as you have an itinerary, I guess that's what matters.
That's it. I had a good time. I had a real good time, though. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, by the way, before I introduce our guest, I reported last week that a very good friend of ours, a big supporter of our show, was in the hospital in the intensive care unit. I can tell you now that Puffy is out of the intensive care. He's in a regular room, and hopefully by the end of this week, he should be leaving the hospital. So, and he told me this morning that he was going to be watching the show tonight. So, Puff Daddy, we wish you the absolute very best, brother. Hope you get well soon, and I'll see you in the morning. Without any further ado, man, see, everybody's wearing black and gold except one. He's got that that bird on his hat. So, but he's for the Seattle Seahawks for us. We've had him on before the week of the Seahawks game. Zachery Vetsch. How you doing, Zach?
Doing just fine. I get to get off work and come talk football with you boys, so it's a good day, I think.
Absolutely. Real quick, we want to get into things quickly tonight. We want to talk about the newest developments in the Brandin Cooks, Malcolm Butler trade, gash, fleecing, whatever you want to call it. Alan, can you kind of bring us up to date on where we stand with that right now?
Well, the Brandin Cooks trade is in the books. Basically, we gave up Brandin Cooks for, as everyone knows, a first-round pick, the 32nd overall pick, and the third-round pick, which was a low third round, is a compensatory pick that the Patriots got from Cleveland. I'm guessing for the Collins trade. Is that correct, Matt? Yeah, okay. So we got that pick, and then we gave them our fourth-round pick, which, of course, Bill Belichick immediately set on fire and threw into Bayou Signet because that pick he had to forfeit for Deflategate. And the ruling was from Darth Goodell was that the Patriots had to give up the highest fourth-round pick they had. And in this case, it became the Saints' fourth-round pick. So essentially, we gave them a pick that we knew they were going to throw away so they could keep their fourth-round pick. So we gave up Brandin Cooks essentially for the 32nd overall pick. And I look at the third-round pick as we traded our fourth to move up, 6 spots to get to the bottom of the third. And that's just a reality for me. I mean, the Malcolm Butler deal, that's a totally separate entity now. It has nothing to do with the Cooks trade anymore because what people have to understand is Butler is a free agent, a restricted free agent, but a free agent nonetheless. He doesn't have a contract, so he cannot be traded unless he signs his tender, which he's not going to do that. And that is the whole crux of why we didn't trade Cooks for Butler like people were assuming it was going to happen.
Yeah, I was, as I understand it, Alan, and bear with me here. I want to go through this list to make sure that this is as it is supposed to. As I understand it now, we have in the first round we got 11 and 30. In round 2, we've got number 10. In round 3, we have round. In round number 3, we have pick 12 and 39. We have no 4th and no 5th.
No.
And in the 6th, we have 12, and in the 7th, we have 11. Maybe Matt can answer me clearer on that. That's as it is as at the moment, correct?
Right.
That's as it is at the moment. We have in day 3, we only have a 6th and a 7th. We have 2 third-rounders, a 2nd, and 2 firsts.
And your 5th rounder went away because you traded that last year for the right to go into the 4th round to get Onyemata. So you traded your 5th round pick in 2017 for the right to get into the 4th round of the 2016 draft, and we drafted David Onyemata from Canada. So that's why we don't have a 5th round pick.
When we look back at it, say the benefit of maybe 10 years in the future, do you think that we're going to look back at the 2016 draft as being one of the best of the Sean Payton era?
It's got to be now. Here's my thing. Okay, you traded Brandin Cooks, who was a 1,000-yard receiver and had almost the same numbers, at 81 catches, 78 catches, or something like that, for over 1,000 yards. I think Brandin Cooks may have wanted out, but I think the Saints' attitude was, we need more draft picks to draft defense if we're going to do that, or draft to fill positions of need. And
yeah,
I thought about this today as I was listening to another podcast. Back in 2006, when the Saints were demolishing the Cowboys on Sunday night, Joe Horn's on the sidelines, okay? And allegedly, and Joe Horn talked about this as part of the reason why he went to Atlanta in 2007. Allegedly, Sean turned to Joe at some point while they were scoring 42 points on the Cowboys and said, see, we don't need you to do this. And you look at Joe Horn's career. Joe Horn was a leading receiver for the Saints from 2000 to 2005, okay? And it seems like since that moment in 2006, the Saints have had the attitude of, if you start to think that you're bigger than this offense or that you're critical to this offense,
yeah.
we're moving you. And he did this with Jimmy Graham, and he went to Seattle. And now he did this with Brandin Cooks. And I thought about that, and I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Because we did it with Reggie Bush. We did it with Darren Sproles. We've done it with almost every player that, has seemed to be the player that once we lose this guy, oh, man, there's no way. Our offense will never be the same. And yet here we are. We're always number one, or anywhere from 5 to 1 is the top offense in the league. So they felt like we can afford to lose a Brandin Cooks because we can always bring in somebody else to fill that role. We can draft somebody to fill that role, and then we'll just keep going. We'll keep rolling the way we always roll because we have Drew Brees and we have a system that produces. So now we're going to start looking in the draft at receivers. But on the other thing is they looked at the free agent class that came in, and they knew who was probably going to get tendered, and most of the best players were tendered. And they looked at the kind of money teams were going to throw around at players, and they said, okay, we're not going to be able to get all the needs that we need to have filled in free agency, so we've got to make some moves in the draft. And I think that was the other thinking behind trading Brandin Cooks. We need the picks. We need access to, if we have 2 first-rounders, then we could take care of the defense in the first two rounds. Then we can start addressing receiver, third running back, whatever defensive play we don't get out of a defensive end, linebacker, cornerback, safety, all those kind of things, because now you've got we just said 5 players in the top 100 to choose from. So I think all those factors play into it. So now to answer that long-about way, to answer your question, yeah, the 2017 draft is going to be huge because you've got to make it work. You've got to be able to get 4 starters or 4 people who contribute at a high level like you got in 2016. And that's Absolutely. Just the way I see it.
I agree completely. And I do believe, and I've had this conversation with Puffy, as a matter of fact, this morning. I think that this team is closer than what a lot of insiders are allowing. They want to tell you how many players we are from being a contender. Well, that's all fine and good if that's your thing. I'm not looking at it that way. I'm looking at the fact that we lost 9 games last year by 6 points or less. That's 1 more possession. That's 1 less fumble. That's 1 extra touchdown where you kicked a field goal. That's 1 field goal you didn't have blocked. When you get down to the intangibles being the deciding factor of games, you're close.
Well, and I think, we'll see here the same thing out of Seattle. I think Seattle can look at this their season pretty much the same way. They are a handful of plays away. Stephen Hauschka has the total meltdown this year after being one of the more consistent kickers in the league. And right away, they can look and say, okay, if Hauschka doesn't miss that extra point, if Hauschka doesn't miss that field goal, we have a good chance of winning and probably beating a couple of teams that they lost to this past year, including the Saints.
You can look at our schedule. there were right off the top of my head, there were 3 games that we lost on kicks that were blocked. Correct?
Yeah.
The Giants,
absolutely.
the Broncos, and something else.
The Carolina Panthers.
Games, right?
Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
In Carolina on Thursday night.
On blocked kicks.
Yeah.
You take those 3 games, that moves it from a 7-9 record to a 10-6 record.
And then you look at the free agent moves they made. What's the first players they signed? They signed Ted Ginn Jr., kick returner. They start signing all these players to fill up your free agency with Banjo and so forth. They're trying to build up the special teams aspect, which is really falling apart. You got new special teams coaches. You've got a new linebackers coach. You've got a new defensive line coach. They signed Okafor today as a outside linebacker / pass rusher. Maybe not as a starter, probably not as a starter, but somebody who's going to come in and rotate with players to rush the passer. So, they're trying to address those needs, and their attitude is, let's say they give up a second for Butler, but they draft a cornerback at the bottom of the first round. So here you got 2 new corners coming in, plus bringing back more. Plus you'd have Bro and Williams and Swan and all the other players that you've been working with that were all injured last year. So now your secondary may be a position of strength. So yeah, that's how they're kind of looking at this thing. Bring in bodies, bring in these pieces, and see what we can do with that. But let's not all try and do it all in one swoop, via the draft. Which leads us, of course, let's talk about the draft then. What did you guys? We'll start with Matt, since Matt's been the quiet here, and then we'll go over to Zachery next. But Matt, who did you see, or who impressed you the most out of the combine that you think really boosted their stock to, say, in the top 20? Because I won't nail you down with the top 10. Let's say the top 20. Somebody who was probably a borderline second-round player that may have vaulted in the top 20.
Besides the obvious, which is Hassan Reddick. Reddick is running the 4.52. That's something that you don't really see every day. Another player, I would have to probably say it's probably John Ross from Washington. He was a bit of a kind of a late first round, and based off free agent was going late second round, kind of a mid second round. But now he's kind of vaulted himself to being worthy of top 20. Though I don't know if he will go top 20, just because it seems like wide receivers being taken left and right in free agency.
Who do you think he would go to if he went in the top 20? Who would be interested in him?
Off top of the bat, probably Cleveland, just because why not? But
they lost Terrell Pryor, so they really have nothing.
Yeah, they lost.
And they have 7 picks every round, right?
Yeah, they've got an unbelievable amount of picks.
Oh yeah, that GM's pick order. You might see one.
Hey,
yeah, you'll see one.
It's money ball.
To have that many picks and still suck that bad is monumental, brother.
They're playing money ball. They're letting everybody go and hoarding draft picks to load the roster up with a lot of high draft picks. It's a daring plan, but if they pull it off, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. According to Terrell Pryor, though,
he's loading it up next to him.
Cleveland was because of like contract breakdown. Like he wasn't giving him what he wanted, and seeing what he got from Washington was basically a 1-year deal for $8 million. You gotta really look at it and go, Cleveland, how bad did you F up? Just how bad did you have to F up to let him walk to go to another team to basically get a cheap contract?
So, Zach, who do you?
You can say the same thing about the New England Patriots with Malcolm Butler. What did Butler have to do for the Patriots to bring in somebody that wasn't even on their roster and give him the money that Butler was asking for?
Well, that's the red flag to me with Butler. Why are the Patriots so anxious to get rid of him? It's not because they don't want to pay him. Well, they don't want to pay. because they are paying somebody. They're paying Gilmore. So the question becomes now, why do they want to not pay him? What do they know about him that we don't know?
Yeah.
And like I told y'all off the air, you try and get to a stare down contest with Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick could beat a statue at a stare down, on a flinch on anything.
No.
Zach, who did you? Let me ask Zach real quick. Who did you see do really well in the combine that kind of vaulted themselves in the top 20 or into the first round, and where do you see them going?
Well, this guy I'm going to talk about here really quick. I didn't really know much about him going into the combine, but he caught my eye just strictly off of the way that he ran the 40, which was a 4.6 and a 41-inch vertical, and that's the D end out of Texas A&M, Myles Garrett, I believe is his name. I just think the guy is an impressive talent, and I think he can come off the edge and really set that edge for you in the run game and get after the passer as well. So he would be my go-to guy who's kind of that sneak, maybe late first round, early second round, that maybe vaulted himself up higher. As far as where I see him going, I mean, I'm going to take Cleveland out of the equation because they could pick anybody at any position. It really doesn't matter. So they're definitely in there. But you got to look at the teams whose defenses weren't very good. You could go to a Jacksonville, maybe another team who's just short of one or two players to try to bolster that defense to get them to the next level. A Tennessee, maybe even a Carolina, who I believe they just lost one of their defensive ends to New England. I think he really made a name for himself in the combine, and I think we're going to see him go a lot higher.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I can see that.
I have, as for whatever it's worth, I have Garrett picked as my first pick of the draft going to Cleveland.
I'm pretty sure you're going to find no draft where he is not the number one overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
And we're more familiar with Garrett though, because
because he's
the South.
A&M and played.
He's from Seattle.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the SEC or anything like that. I know a few of the big name guys, but I hadn't heard a whole lot about Myles Garrett. But watching the combine, he just jumped off the page of me, man.
Well, Zachery, was there anyone to you that, and I'm going to make this a little tougher on you guys, outside of Reuben Foster, is there anyone that really you think maybe could have hurt their stock by participating in the combine?
Not off the top of my head. I don't have anybody really off the top of my head that I think really hurt themselves. Yeah, man. It was a guy, Taco Charlton. He's a guy from Michigan, I think is his name.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of talk about him coming into the thing. I didn't see anything really impressive out of him. Nothing to jump him to the top of the board. So I'm not going to necessarily say it hurt him, but I don't think he proved anything.
Yeah. How about you, Matt?
I got two guys in mind, both of them from the SEC. The first guy is cornerback Jalen Tabor. I was very disappointed with him because, for one, he ran a 4.62, and he's 6 foot 199. There was Cordero Tankersley from Clemson who ran a 4.4 even, and then you got Tabor, who's not that much different, ran a 4.62. I didn't watch him run. I just saw the results, so I don't know if he had like a bad get off or anything like that. But he had he was basically ranked in the bottom 5 in almost everything: vertical, broad, 3-cone. He just had the worst day of his life. And the second guy is Zach Cunningham from Vanderbilt. I know there's a lot of Saints fans that want Cunningham. They want him on the team because of his explosiveness. He's a high-producing player. Let me tell you, in open field position drills, every analyst was saying he looked stiff when he was trying to do all those drills. And I have to agree with him. When we looked at the film, he looked stiff. He didn't look like that explosive linebacker that everyone was clamoring him to be. And he already has one big knock where you got to leave him open because he can't disengage from stronger blockers. But now seeing him in that terrible combine, I'm sorry, I don't want him on the team. I think he'd be a bad selection.
What about Sidney Jones? His injury now affecting the corner position. How do you see Sidney Jones affecting the draft? Because I'm reading everything from he could drop, he was a guaranteed first rounder before his knee injury. Now after the injury, you're talking maybe third or fourth round before a team may take a gamble on him. How do you see that affecting the board as far as cornerbacks?
Well, you had a lot of teams, especially in the top 15, that wanted a cornerback. The Eagles are the first team that comes to mind, and they were probably primed to take Jones. But now with that that torn Achilles tendon, it's going to flux a lot of people. You're going to see, for one, a lot of reaches. You're going to see maybe Marlon Humphrey from Bama being taken in the top 15, who was probably a late first-round pick. You're probably going to see Chidobe Awuzie, Cordero Tankersley. You're going to see a lot of guys that probably had these borderline first-round grades become reaches, or they might try and trade down and have these teams get players that they wanted, and you'll see those teams later in the draft getting a cornerback like that.
Do you think that Sidney Jones is worth taking a risk on now?
I do. I personally do. I watched him in the Pac-12 this year. I think the kid is outstanding talent, and that's an unfortunate injury during your pro day, especially in the last drill of your pro day. But say he bounces back, the kid's got ridiculous talent. And not only that, I was going to bring up Sidney Jones. I figured you guys would anyway, but I was going to talk about him too. There's another guy I also wanted to talk about during the season this year when Washington went on their run. Quarterbacks started throwing away from Sidney Jones because he was such a shutdown corner. So they started throwing the other side, and that's when you run into Kevin King. Kevin King is no slouch at the opposite corner himself. He ran a 4.43 40, which isn't John Ross fast, which nobody's John Ross fast, but it's still pretty good time. And he stepped up huge this year when teams started going to the other side of the field away from Sidney Jones. As far as cornerbacks go as a whole, I also like the cornerback from Florida, Quincy Wilson. I've been watching tape on these guys all year because Seattle, with the injury to Deshaun Shedd in Atlanta this year in the postseason, we needed another opposite corner of Richard Sherman. So I started kind of looking in possible guys that may fall to 26 to Seattle. And I would be ecstatic if we were able to get a guy like Quincy Wilson. I watched some tape on him. I think he's a good shutdown corner. With Earl Thomas coming back this year, Cam Chancellor coming back this year healthy, he'll have help over the top. KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner are good at dropping into coverage, helping out on routes across the middle, and give the rookie an opportunity to get some man-to-man situations as long as he has help over the top. I think he'd be a great fit in Seattle, and I think he's one of those guys that may fall to 26.
Well, and I'm glad you brought Quincy Wilson up because that is a good example of something I was thinking about with Sidney Jones dropping because of his injury, and you possibly can get him late in the draft or later in the draft. A player like a Quincy Jones could see his stock rise to that bottom half of the first round because, you're going to start seeing like a run on some of the corners. You'll start seeing say a Dory Jackson going early because of his kick return skills as well as playing corner. You'll see some of those guys kind of moving early. So you see those borderline second round picks. I put together a mock, and I'm probably going to publish this one. Well, I don't know if I'm going to publish it. I might share it with you guys later on. I'll put together a mock where I had the Saints actually drafting an LSU player, Tre'Davious White, at 32.
How dare you?
I know. But here's a guy that was, again, a borderline 1-2, but you could get him at the bottom half of the first round because now you see that kind of that run on corners because of Sidney Jones is out. So that's just – I'm just forecasting based on Seattle's needs, based on some of those teams at the bottom half of the draft's needs, Atlanta – teams like that will need some new corners. And I could see him still being available around 32.
Yeah, like I said,
We'll see how this
reaches. You're going to see a couple reaches of corners in that draft. I think one,
especially because of the size.
Yeah, a lot of them are coming in at 6 foot, which is pretty good.
Yeah, you've got a lot of big receivers now in the NFL, and now you're getting a lot more big cornerbacks. What? Lattimore is what? 6 foot. Humphrey's 6'1". Sidney Jones is 6 foot. Tabor is 6 foot. The guy we just talked about, Quincy Wilson, 6'1". You know, so you're seeing a lot of big, tall, physical corners who can run. And I think you'll see a lot of teams jumping on those guys over, say, Tre'Davious White, who is 5'11". And granted, he's got a good leap, he's got a good jump, and he's got great speed. But if you got corners that can run or just as fast that are taller, you can see guys reaching for the tall guy as opposed to taking a 5'11" guy. That's just how I see it.
Yeah.
I could be totally wrong.
Looking at was a guy from Colorado, Akilo Witherspoon, 6'3", 198, had a great 40, had a fantastic vertical. I think he was top of the class.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked him going maybe second or even third round. Thought of him highly.
Zach, who, if you were doing a mock draft for the Seahawks, what positions in need are the greatest for the Seahawks? Offensive line, cornerback, two things we talked about. What else do you see?
Well, yeah, like you said, O-line's number one. Cornerback, we need some depth there. There's no doubt about that. We also need an outside linebacker. Last year, losing Bruce Irvin to Oakland, and kind of moving Frank Clark into that role worked a little bit, but we need a solid outside linebacker to be back there with Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. Another position I think you're going to see them go after is depth at safety. Cam Chancellor is getting older. Earl Thomas is getting older. Injuries are becoming more troublesome for both guys, and we're running out of depth there. Kelsey McCray is a guy who played a bunch of games for us last year with Cam going out or Earl Thomas going down. And even at one point, we had brought Jerron Johnson back. So there needs to be some youth and some depth put in at the defensive back position all the way around. Offensively, it's one of those things where I don't think there's a whole lot that we can do there other than the offensive line. I think we have decent receivers. You might see somebody get picked up, but Tyler Lockett's coming back from that broken leg. You still have Doug Baldwin. You still have Jermaine Kearse. Paul Richardson came on in the playoffs last year, so he's probably going to be seeing more time. Still have Jimmy Graham you could throw the ball to. We may get Luke Wilson back. Tight end's one of those positions you either draft a guy or still try to bring in a free agent to fill in. But I think it all comes down to defensive secondary and offensive line. Those are the two main spots we need to hit.
Yeah, especially after you made monster running back signing today. Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you, man. We got the Hamburglar back there.
I'm telling you, like I've been saying to people, that, you know, every time he touches the ball, if I'm the Seattle guy working the music and the sound in the stadium, I am totally playing the Fat Albert theme.
Now, what about this? What about this?
Every time he runs.
Oh,
Hear
man.
me out on this. A couple years back, the Super Bowl run, Super Bowl 48 against Denver, we had run that whole season with Marshawn Lynch. Obviously, we don't have a Marshawn Lynch, but we had fullback Michael Robinson, and we haven't been running a fullback since then.
Mm-hmm.
What about throw Eddie Lacy at fullback? He's big enough. I mean, he's more than big enough, and let Thomas Rawls and C.J. Prosise run behind him. Why not?
You know, here's the issue with that. You know, the problem with Lacy is it's not the good kind of big. Well,
throw him into people.
It's not the good kind of big he's putting on. It's the bad kind of big. He's trying to, you know, he's got the beer gut or the deer gut. You know, he just. I'm going back to my Far Side cartoons. You know, with the bear with the big belly, and they said, yeah, all his friends did want to point out his deer gut. You know, so, but yeah, if he was muscle and that big. That would be one thing, and that's part of his injury history. Is he gets overweight, out of shape, and then his joints just take the abuse, and he can't stay healthy. But
turn sideways in the mirror, acknowledge your name is not Bettis, and lose some weight.
I tell you,
Hey, that reminds.
and it's funny
that
because
reminds, I'm
only in
sorry.
professional football can you call a 330-pound guy an elite athlete, but it's that's not a case of an elite athlete.
I got a good joke.
That reminds me, we need to send positive wishes out to one of our snowbound buddies.
Yeah, I was about to mention
John
that.
Pinto.
Yeah,
John Pinto is in Maine, snowbound. We need to send him good wishes.
John is about to totally go Jack Nicholson in The Shining in a few minutes. It is getting to that point in the house.
Yeah, he sent me a picture earlier, and you could see it was like a hand reached up out of the snow. It was the handle of the shovel.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's been 80 degrees almost every day this month. Today it's actually cool, but we had
nice.
We
had a weekend of winter. That was it.
We woke to 30 something, high 30s this morning, and Monday it's supposed to be 79.
Oh,
That's how it's gonna be this weekend.
That must be rough on you guys. Oh man, 79. How do you do it?
We have 9 months of summer, and not just like the kind of let's hang out by the beach summer kind of thing. Yeah, not like let's hang out at the beach kind of summer, nice dry heat. No, summer like the oppressive, everything sweats.
I've been there.
Yeah, I mean, you know that from up in Seattle. Just imagine that humidity. Except it's now 90 to 100 degrees with that humidity. So
I had to deal with that a little bit Missouri was my first taste of humidity, and then went down to Georgia for a little trip, and I thought that would be fun. Well, don't go to Georgia in July if you're from the Pacific Northwest. You can't breathe.
No. I know.
You were active duty in the Gulf War, correct?
No. Gulf War? Shoot, I was pooping my pants.
Yeah, you put him in our age group here, Sean. That was Gulf War was 1991. You're talking about
when I say Gulf War, I mean when the Iraqi War. The second one was when you were active, correct?
Yes. So 2009, 2012 was my active dates.
Well, first of all, thank you again for your service, brother.
Thanks, sir.
For those who do not know, Zachery is a retired.
No, just got out.
He is a resigned United States Army veteran.
ETS.
Yeah,
that's a proper term.
That sounds like a
that is the proper term is ETS.
Okay. Thank you for your service, sir.
I think I still have some MREs left over from Katrina. Do you want me to send them up there to you?
Hey, you know what? I haven't had an MRE in about 5 years, so that actually sounds pretty good. You can send them up my way.
Hey, man, it's 11 years old. I promise you, it's still as fresh as ever.
Oh, it's still good.
They still eat them things from the Civil War, don't they?
Spam in a can, man. I'm telling you.
Oh,
that's Lord. Right.
Spam and Vienna sausage.
It never goes bad.
Okay.
How did we get off topic?
We're going to start talking about the military now. So Matt, who do you see as, let's say, the top 5 picks in the draft? Who do you see as your top 5?
Garrett, Trubisky, Jonathan Allen, Leonard Fournette, and Mike Williams.
Interesting. Trubisky that high.
I like that because he picked Leonard Fournette.
Oh yeah,
Leonard Fournette does not make it.
Is sold on getting Fournette. They basically upgraded practically everything else just so Leonard Fournette can go to Jacksonville.
Hey, that'd be awesome. That would be awesome. So Carolina doesn't get him because I do not want to have to look at Fournette twice a year, even though I think Fournette wouldn't do very well in Carolina because they just have a terrible offensive line. They paid for a lineman that the Minnesota fans were like, thank you for the charity. We are glad to be rid of him. He's not quite the turnstile that we had years ago with Darryl Terrell with to replace. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Bless you. To replace Willie Rofe when Rofe got hurt back in 2001. But he's pretty close to being a human turnstile. So that's great that he's in Jacksonville, and he's in Carolina, and that Fournette will go to Jacksonville. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And that contract deal is basically a
one-year
tryout. Yeah, that deal, that 5-year, $55 million. Yeah, it has a 1-year clause where if he screws up the first year, which he probably will, they get to cut him and nothing happens.
Okay.
His lawyer needs to be fired.
Well, Jacksonville always seems to have Jacksonville's one of these teams that's always picking in the top 5, has on paper, a great draft, but when it goes out to play on the field, it's a horrible team because.
Well, I mean, you got to look at it like 2 years ago. They have what was it, the number 1 or the number 2 pick? They picked Dante Fowler, and in the third rep of a non-contact, non-pad drill, he goes down with a blown-out knee.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the old Indianapolis Colts. Old Indianapolis Colts luck. That was when, the Colts were drafting people like Trev Alberts and things like that, and they were getting injured every time you got drafted by the Colts. Zach, how about you? Who do you see as the top 5 picks of the draft? Do you have a quarterback in there in the top 5?
I don't have a quarterback going in the top 5. I don't like this quarterback class this year. I just don't see anybody jumps off the page. Then again, though, it is the NFL draft. You never know what's going to happen and who's going to reach for who. Mm-hmm. And I haven't done any mock drafts or anything. I haven't just had the time to do them. So I don't have the top 5 picks for you. But as far as it goes for a quarterback, I don't see Trubisky going that high. Maybe he is a first-round pick, and I'm sure he will be. But that's just like drafting Blaine Gabbert all over again, if you ask me. I hate to make that comparison to a guy who hasn't played a snap in the league yet, but I just don't see anything special with him. Leonard Fournette is just one of those guys who's going to go top 5, no doubt about it. Doesn't really matter where he goes. I think the guy's going to produce. He's an impressive physical specimen of a running back, and he's just amazing. I mean, you watch him at LSU, the guy is just untouchable, and I just think he's going to transfer to the league very well.
Let's play Alabama, and Alabama touches him a lot. The running joke was Alabama fans said when Leonard Fournette ran a 4.5 40 or 4.4 40, something like that, a really good time. 4 point. Oh, really? Okay. Well, they said basically they were impressed because they'd never seen Leonard Fournette run for 40 yards. So,
well, we got a taste of Alabama's defense this year in the college football playoff, and our offense in University of Washington was really good all year long, and then you play Alabama, and boy, we were awful.
Well, to me, Alabama lost that championship game because the offense became so inept. Clemson did a great job, but I think it was more the case of they made that freshman quarterback look like a freshman quarterback, and too many 3-and-outs just wore out that defense. They could not keep up for that long in that second half, and that's basically what happened. And you kind of saw that replayed in the Super Bowl with Atlanta and New England. Atlanta's offense could not control the clock long enough because of play calling and mistakes they made, but eventually that defense got tired, and New England was able to come back just like Clemson did. So,
I think in an interesting segue, I think the most talented quarterback in the draft this year probably could be Deshaun Watson from Clemson that won the national championship this year. Mm-hmm. But at best, if you want my honest to God evaluation, I think it's going to be a 3 to 5 year project player at best, because he is a college quarterback, and he's going to have to make that transition from being a throw if you can, run if you have to being
a one read tuck and throw. Yeah, yeah, and he played what he primarily in the shotgun, so he has to learn his footwork to come from under center, which is, I guess that's why I was kind of surprised. You know, you got Trubisky going in your top 5 there, Matt, and I do know that Jacksonville needs a quarterback, the Jets need a quarterback, the Browns need a quarterback,
49ers.
Quarterback. The Bears need a quarterback, despite giving all that money to that Bucks backup. Where does Deshaun Foster fit then in y'all's mind? In a quarterback needy draft, it's not very good, but you've got enough quarterback needy teams that may reach and take one early, or may trade back in first round to get one, because they want that 5-year deal.
I think that probably Trubisky goes first before Watson, because he played the more pro-friendly offense at North Carolina. Like I said, Watson is going to basically have to be a break it down and reprogram your entire thinking and your style for him to be a starting quality player in the NFL. That's my opinion.
How about you, Matt? Where do you see Watson going, if anywhere in the first round?
He'll be reached somewhere in the top 15. If he goes top 10, it's because someone traded into the draft to get him. I have him going either to Cleveland, help him, or Arizona, because they need someone to replace Carson Palmer, who is on his last leg. And you got Cleveland, who, well, when do they not need a quarterback, in my opinion?
Well, yeah.
You were talking earlier about the turnstile.
Yeah.
Well, at least Cleveland has a nice offensive line for him to wait 10 seconds to get a ball to no receivers.
Well, Cleveland picks 1 and 12, and that's a 2. They got 1 and 12, so they could theoretically grab him at 12. Cardinals are at 13. They need a quarterback. He's going to do with Cousins.
I heard Cardinals are really enamored with Deshaun Watson. They really like him.
They
might even try to trade
Arians love him
ahead of the Browns to get Watson. So if things don't go our way with the draft, say Barnett does get picked ahead of us, and Cardinals really want to get Watson because they're afraid Cleveland is going to, that might not be a bad trade-off, in my opinion.
Oh, drop down to 13? Okay. I can see that.
Yeah, just pick up an extra pick with it, whether it's a third or even a fourth round.
Zach, how about you? Where do you see Watson going in this draft?
Well, I thought all along, up until, probably the past month or so, I thought he was going to be picked up by Cleveland, just because Cleveland does the same thing every year. They reach for the high-profile, high-name guys coming out of college. They don't build a team around those guys to set them up for success, and it fails. Mm-hmm. I see them doing the same thing. Now, if they don't, I've also thought that Arizona as well would be going for him. And hear me out on this. The way I look at Arizona, I look at them as a division rival with the Seahawks, and they do a lot of things, or they're building their team a lot like Seattle has. You look at Richard Sherman, well, you got Patrick Peterson. You at the Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu, we got Earl Thomas. They try to build their team a lot like ours. We have Marshawn Lynch, and then they got their running back David Johnson. They seem to copycat a little bit, and I see them look at Russell Wilson all these years, and they want a mobile quarterback, and so they're going to go for a big, high-profile mobile quarterback, Deshaun Watson. I just see them doing that. One of those two teams, Cleveland, makes sense because it's Cleveland and that's what they do. But I can see Arizona definitely trying to do that, and Bruce Arians loving to jump all over that, especially letting him play a year under Carson Palmer. I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Yeah. And then there's one other team that I'm going to throw into the mix here for a quarterback that needs a quarterback that paid Cleveland to take the quarterback mistake they've got. Houston Texans. They're picking 25th, right in front of the Seahawks. Houston is a bit of a wild card. What are they going to do with that 25th pick? If they see Watson slide past the Cardinals and the Browns, do they try and trade up to go get Watson? Or let's say that both Watson and the Notre Dame quarterback start sliding.
Kaiser.
Huh?
Kaiser.
Kaiser.
Or no, I'm sorry, that's a Notre Dame quarterback. I meant the North Carolina quarterback, Trubisky.
Trubisky.
Yeah. They start seeing
Pollock.
those two guys there. Those two guys starting to slide. Does Houston get nervous and start looking for a trading partner? Or here we go again. Let's say that Houston takes. I don't know. I haven't studied Houston's needs enough to know for sure what they need other than a quarterback. But let's say Houston starts looking at running backs and they take a running back in that first round. Do they try and trade back into the 32nd pick with us to go get their quarterback at the bottom of the first round if they see quarterback slide past the Browns and the Cardinals? Because you look at the other teams that are left. The Titans aren't going to take a quarterback. The Bucs aren't going to take a quarterback. The Broncos aren't. The Lions aren't. The Dolphins aren't. The Seahawks certainly are not. The Raiders certainly are not. The Chiefs, maybe. The Cowboys, no. The Steelers, no. The Packers obviously no. So, there's a lot of teams that will ignore quarterback. So, it's a possibility.
I think that not only the Houston Texans, but also the Denver Broncos, their strategy is, in terms of what they're going to do in the first round, is probably going to be shaped a lot by what develops with the Tony Romo situation and whether is able to get him to come to them. The last accounts that I had, the last thing that I heard on the whole thing was that Dallas wanted to work out some sort of trade situation rather than just releasing Romo. They wanted to work out some sort of trade with Denver to try to get some sort of return on Romo.
That's not going to happen.
But, that's been about a week ago now.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought I read
we might not even go for Romo even if released.
Yeah, I thought he was scheduled to be released. Maybe I misread that thing. All I know is they had the brilliant NFL.
Dallas, we might go for Romo if he's released. And they go, oh, really? Well, what if we work up a trade now?
Yeah, well, that was right at the brilliant meme they had of the ambulance driving down the highway with the sirens going. And so Tony Romo was on his way to meet with the Houston Texans. So.
I saw that. That was a good day.
That was very funny.
I think that in all likelihood, in all seriousness, though, I do believe that Romo goes either to Denver or to Houston. It's just which one of them is willing to sweeten the pot enough to get Jerry to do business with them. To answer your question a little further, I think that's going to trickle down and affect the first round draft strategy of both teams as well.
I don't see him going to Houston or to Denver at all whatsoever. I think John Elway just kind of moved on and past that. I think Houston's going to get to that point where they get a little excited and pull the trigger and make something happen, and that's where Tony Romo is going to go. He's going to end up there. As far as Houston drafting a quarterback, maybe they do. If they get Tony Romo and then they're like, okay, we can get Deshaun Watson as a backup and maybe even groom him under Tony Romo a little bit. I like that, and I could see that possibly happening. But I think if they're going into the draft without a quarterback, I don't think they're going to draft a guy like Deshaun Watson. I think that they're close enough in a bad division to make the postseason. They're close enough to where they can continue bolstering that defense. I think they just lost one of their top cornerbacks. Draft a corner, bolster the rest of that defense back up, and maybe add a couple pieces on offense to get more weapons, and then work on getting a veteran quarterback in there, and then plan for the future, maybe next year's free agency or even a trade for somebody else to plan for your future quarterback. I just don't think now is the time to draft Deshaun Watson in the first round for Houston.
The Houston Texans remind me so much of that. This is before y'all's time. Well, not Sean's time, but before you two. The 1983 Saints under Bum Phillips. I mean, you had a great defense, a powerful running game, and you've got Kenny Stabler at 37 years old on his bad knees. You're trying to squeeze one more year out of him, and I think that's what
You got everybody retired from the Houston Oilers playing in the backfield of the New Orleans.
Exactly. You're trying to rebuild the old Houston Oilers love you blue era with
every Saints fan's wet dream right now, trying to get every washed up veteran on the Saints.
Yeah, I mean it's just, but you're close, and the thing is with the Texans, they feel like they've got the defense, they're close. We're just a quarterback away, so we're gonna do these things to get that quarterback, and they keep trying to get that veteran guy. Or that guy that's going to carry them to that next level. And I think that's their love affair with Tony Romo, aside from coming down from Dallas and making the Texans now legitimate the team in Texas instead of the Cowboys. You get Romo in there to be like that Kenny Stabler to get them over the hump to win a playoff game, to advance in the playoffs, because the AFC pretty much stinks. Especially the AFC South, the division they play in. You got the Jacksonville Jaguars, you've got the Colts, you've got the Titans, who are an up-and-coming young team, but the Texans feel like they could. Yeah, the Texans feel like they can take that next step. So
they would almost have to be better.
Yeah, well, they think they've got all the pieces in place to make a run. You've got a good receiver. You've got a good offensive line that can run the ball. You've got a great defense that can rush the passer. They lost Bowie, but, they can get a cornerback in the draft. They just feel like they need to get that quarterback who can get that ball out to those receivers and make that next step. And, so that's why I can see them looking at Watson, okay, Romo's made of glass. We know he'll probably get hurt sometime during the season. We can get a guy like Watson in there who can run as well as throw, maybe give us that whole almost like a Dallas Cowboy feel again, with the quarterback they had in Dallas this past year from Mississippi State, whose name escapes me right now. And I know Matthew.
Dak.
Yeah, the Dak Prescott. Yeah, I knew Matt was probably going to be screaming that name. Matthew, the big Mississippi State fan, screaming that name at the monitor right now. But yeah, that same kind of feel where, he doesn't have to make the plays. He can just make the plays, get the ball to his playmakers. So, just
me personally, I think that, and, before, let me put this disclaimer out there. I think that maybe, in all likelihood, Tony Romo may be one of the most underrated quarterbacks of the last decade, playing for Dallas. But now, that being said, and this goes to,
had he not played for the Cowboys, I'd agree with you. Because had he not played for the Cowboys, I probably would agree with you. But the fact that he plays for the Cowboys, it makes him overrated, because ESPN will run a breaking news story that Tony Romo had to go to the bathroom at halftime, because that is how the media is built.
That's how you sell pictures. That's how you make money.
I mean, Seattle.
Well, you didn't let me finish.
Well, I was going to say Seattle knows
that. Being said, if you're making a plan for your future that involves Tony Romo, you don't have a future.
No.
Not a long-term future at all.
No. And I was going to say, Seattle knows what I mean, because Seattle wins a Super Bowl in 2015, and the media acts like, oh, yeah, they won a Super Bowl. But let's talk about the Cowboys. Let's talk about the Patriots. Let's talk about, the major media market teams. Yeah, they got that team up there in the Northwest somewhere, but,
Let's think about Chip Kelly and the Eagles, and how about they're going to run the table and go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it. What team gets all the –
Michael Thomas is a prime example. Excuse me, not Michael Thomas. Brandin Cooks is a prime example. When they're debating on whether or not to take this deal to trade Cooks, it was Patriots are debating the deal. Come on,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
the ultimate disservice, disrespect, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, because in all honesty, I think the Seattle defense and people right now watching is going, was this a Seattle podcast or a Saints podcast? But
I'm liking it.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think the Seattle defense was just as good, if not better, defense. But we heard all about Ray Lewis and we heard all about the Baltimore Ravens after they won their Super Bowl. But you rarely heard anything about Seattle unless Seattle was on TV. And it's the nature.
That's because
that's
because that German boy jumped on the reporter after that there game.
But I'm just saying, it's rarely, it's all the small market versus the major media markets. And Baltimore is outside of Washington, D.C., so if it wasn't for Green Bay's legacy in the league, Green Bay would get ignored. When's the last time you heard anything about Buffalo? Not that Buffalo's really relevant.
Last thing I heard about Buffalo
they
was they signed Stephen Hauschka, and I was like, okay, whatever. Buffalo.
I mean, it's basically
that they were unloading their secondary.
Yeah, but I mean, even when Buffalo was relevant, they rarely got talked about. It was always talking about the major media markets, and that's been a pet peeve of mine forever. And that's why the Saints get disrespected. That's why Drew Brees certainly gets disrespected by the media when they start talking.
That's the only that's comfortable territory for us. That's the only place that we know how to operate from.
Yeah, but it gets old. It really does.
Well, tell me about it. I've been doing it as long as you have, brother.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I get, Drew Brees throws for 5,000 yards 5 times, and Drew Brees is in that stat. But let's talk about Tom Brady. Let's argue who's the better, Brady or Manning. And we'll throw Aaron Rodgers in the mix.
Don't you think at the same time it's kind of a blessing in disguise to be one of those small market teams that isn't talked about as much? Because when you do have one of those seasons where you're quietly winning and you're one of the top teams in the league, nobody's paying attention to you. But then when you get to the Super Bowl and you win, like you guys did, what was that, 2009, I want to say?
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah. Nobody was expecting the Saints that year. Everybody was still talking about the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, all those guys in those major markets. Well, then you shock the whole world, and it's a huge celebration, and everybody's just losing their mind because there's this team that nobody talked about all year long just came and whooped everybody's butt and won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's
you
nice
are
when you win.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's nice when you win, but it's very frustrating when you're not winning, but individuals have fantastic seasons and it kind of gets ignored because they're like, oh, yeah, because he plays for the Saints.
Well, they talk about you when you lose to a big market team like that. They talk about you for a minute.
Yeah.
Talk about how much
prime example. Last season, we had 2 receivers over 1,000 yards receiving, 1 quarterback over 5,000 yards receiving, and a running back over 1,000 yards rushing. That's only the second time since the league began that's ever happened.
But
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
But we were 7-9, and none of those guys went to the Pro Bowl except Drew did as an alternate.
Oh,
but none of those other guys were in the Pro Bowl. Especially this guy here, Michael Thomas. He wasn't even in the conversation for Rookie of the Year, and that's really what kind of chaps my behind.
Well, but from an outsider's perspective,
wait, Matt, I'm sorry, Zach. What were you going to say from an outsider's perspective? What?
I was going to say from an outsider's perspective, when I talked to you guys, I believe it was on October, before the Saints game and Seahawks down in New Orleans. I was very knowledgeable on Michael Thomas, and I talked to you guys a lot about being worried about the guy. Other people and fans around the league, we notice those type of things. Maybe the league doesn't when it comes to Pro Bowl and noticing what these guys do throughout the season. But I talked to you guys about it like the dude is a monster because he is a monster. So eventually he's going to get that notoriety. He may not be one of those big name guys because of the market he is in, but people are going to know coming into that week when you're playing New Orleans, you got to watch out for this guy, and they're going to be game planning for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Matt, what were you going to say? You froze on us for a second. What were you getting ready to say?
What I was going to say is that you can just feel the pro NFC East because on NFL.com, they made a video of top 10 rookie performances. They showed basically 4 players. You had 4 different videos of Ezekiel Elliott going off. You had 3 different videos of Dak Prescott going off. You had 2 different videos of Carson Wentz going off. And both those games, he threw for under 200 yards and a touchdown. And I think the one other play they had was, I think, Joey Bosa. That was it.
Mm-hmm. And they showed the Michael Thomas reception against the 49ers. I remember that. And that to me, that was an impressive catch. It wasn't his best one, though.
He made that catch against the 49ers. But, and I told him, that's pretty biased. And all of a sudden, every NFL fan was going, yes, yes, yes. I'm like,
yeah. Okay. Well, we kind of went a little bit over today.
I refer to Jack Nicholson in Batman. This town needs an emperor.
Oh God, yeah. We kind of went a little over time, but that's to be expected.
That's for John Pinto.
That's kind of be expected, but so we're pretty much in agreement on who the top 5 are, except for the quarterback position, which again,
you're going to see a reach.
That depends on who reaches based on what was left on the board and who decides to get a quarterback because they're afraid they're not going to be there in the second round.
Well, I think that Matt's correct. There's going to be a team that reaches way, way, way on somebody, be that Trubisky, be that Deshaun Watson, but somebody is going to hit that panic button and they're going to reach for a quarterback in the first round. And it more than likely will be more than one team, probably 2.
Right. That plays well into, I know a lot of people don't like the fact the Saints have only got the third for Cooks, but that actually plays well into the Saints' hand because the more reaches they have in the draft, the better your chances are that a good player slides down to 32nd. And let's say that it doesn't. Then you have the opportunity to be down and acquire more picks because that's what the Saints need. The Saints need, and ultimately that's why this trade happened. Saints need picks because they need bodies. They need multiple draft picks. You can't just you need 7, you need 8, you need 10. So you're going to hopefully see that they're going to do a lot of moving. And with quarterbacks being in the play, with cornerbacks sliding and rising and things like that, I think you're going to see some opportunity for the Saints to trade down and acquire more picks. And that's great for us. So,
well, let me ask you guys one last question before we sign off. I want to ask you guys this. Based on the moves that the Saints have made in free agency, we didn't really get an opportunity tonight to address that. We'll have to do that next week. With the acquisition of Larry Warford, AJ Klein, Ted Ginn Jr., the re-signing of Nick Fairley, which I absolutely consider to be a free agent acquisition all over again. And also today, Alex Okafor. Do you think that we need quite as many picks as what you're talking about, or does this put us closer to the mark than we've ever been before?
I'll answer first and then get some feedback from Matt. I think we need bodies. I think with the injuries we had, who our top 4 or 5 cornerbacks this past season were all finished the season injured reserve. We we had the problem with Armstead finishing most of the games and going into reserve. It's just you lost two of the three starting tight ends that the Saints had. The only one who played the whole season was Fleener. So you need to have more and more people on the team to make up your core. So you're going to need more draft picks because draft picks are cheaper than free agents. From the Lions, clearly is going to be a starter, probably at left guard. That means that Evans is out. Okafor is going to have a role in the team. Ginn's going to be a kick returner. Klein will probably middle linebacker. So what happens? There's another good example. You have a backer in Ellaby, but he can never stay healthy for 16 games. He played the most games this past season, but you still need draft picks to come in, even though, like I think I said in the outset, you need three corners. You probably need another linebacker at least to come in. You definitely need a pass rushing defensive end to come in. So you're not relying purely on Okafor to come in as your primary pass rusher opposite Cam Jordan. Even though you've made these moves, you still need draft picks. You still need to bring in other people.
I guess what I'm asking is, does our moves in free agency for the first time in quite some time, actually, does this put us in a position where we're not going to have to be quite so reliant on nailing it in the draft?
Oh, I still think you got to nail it in the draft regardless. The difference is you don't have to reach for that guy. And the Saints really, except for in 2014, I don't think the Saints have really reached to grab players to fill needs. I think they've always just taken best player available. And it'll frustrate you to no end because, last year we needed a guard. We didn't draft a guard.
In 2015, we needed a guard. We didn't draft one.
Right. I think
Kyrie Fort.
Yeah, you drafted a quarterback and really didn't need to draft a quarterback. We should have drafted a guard in 2015, but that's just their philosophy. And Sean Payton is a gambler. Sean Payton likes to be aggressive. He is one of those guys who bets it all on black and throws it out there, and sometimes it's going to turn out snake eyes like we've been seeing lately. But other times when he hits at 7, like you mentioned, 2009, you were rewarded with a Super Bowl team. So, But he is one of those guys that is just going to – that's the kind of coach he is, the kind of person he is. And that's why the Saints are the way they are right now.
Well, and I did a little bit of didn't mean to cut you guys off there, but I talked to Sean on the phone the other day, and we were kind of talking about the show and about the Saints a little bit, and got into talking about putting on your GM cap as kind of where the conversation went, and so I have done a little bit of digging into the Saints depth chart a little bit, and kind of came up with a couple things that I noticed right off the bat that I took down. Not only just injuries, but it looked a little old as far as your main linebackers went. You brought up Donnell Ellerbe with the injuries. He's also 8-9 years into the league. I even think you had James Laurinaitis at one point, if he's not still there.
No, he's gone. He's gone.
Right. So you had him there at 1.2. He's about the same age, I do believe. So younger linebacker, I think, would be huge. Also getting some depth at that position. We had talked last season about your defensive secondary. You guys unfortunately did have some injuries there, which kind of turned things down that could bounce back. But there was a name that I came up with because I remember we were laughing about Jarris Byrd last year. There's a guy who could possibly fall even into the later rounds that you may not know a lot about. His name is Budda Baker, safety from University of Washington. Again, I'm a little biased, but he ran a 4.45 at the combine. You watch film on the guy. He's all over the field. He kind of reminds me a lot of, again, biased, Earl Thomas. He's all over the field. He's smaller stature, but the guy's a tackler. He's not a big hitter, but he's a tackler, and he's all over the field. He will cover anybody deep, and he's just making plays all over. Another guy I thought that might be interesting, as I brought up safety and linebacker, if he were to fall, and we haven't talked about him at all, is Jabril Peppers, because he's kind of that tweener between linebacker and safety. Say you got a guy like that. Now you got depth at two positions. Say you're solid at linebacker, but you need somebody to drop back into safety. You could throw him there and vice versa. Those are just a couple things I had come up with that I thought might definitely help the franchise out. And it was all defensive based. I think as long as you have a guy like Michael Thomas and a quarterback like Drew Brees and you can give him time, I think the focus just goes to the defensive side of the ball.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and it's, what's that, Matt?
Oh, nothing. Him mentioning Jabril Peppers, I just had to take a nice swig of it because I'm sorry.
Well, you know, here's the thing. Here's the thing with Peppers. Here's the thing with Peppers. The Saints do employ a lot of three safety sets. Back in depth has been so shallow. But you've got a Kenny Vaccaro in there who kind of acts as that hybrid linebacker / safety. So
that's what Peppers is. He's basically your more athletic box safety.
Yeah,
everything's
so
exactly
in front of him where he can just run and shoot.
So you possibly would have two guys playing roughly the same position, but it's still a possibility. It's still something, you have to go and break down the film and look at, how he would fit in your offense. One last thing, and we're really over time, so I'm just going to mention it real quick. I mean, speaking of guys who are multiple position kind of players, a receiver I like a lot, and I know Matt and you and I have talked about this via text messages. I like Curtis Samuel from Ohio State a lot because he played a running back / receiver for Ohio State, kind of like a Percy Harvin, who Seattle's familiar with. And I think he would do well in a Saints Sean Payton system. I know I said a dirty word, Percy Harvin.
That's a cuss word.
Yeah, but he would be Percy Harvin without the insanity. And
Zachery just went into palpitations, man.
Yeah, I mean, I could just see Sean Payton using him kind of starting out their favorite. I'm probably gonna get way too technical. Their favorite position is what they call 11 or I'm drawing a blank on it now, but it's a formation they like to run, posse, 11 or posse, which is a 3-wide set. But you could theoretically start out almost as Samuel in a single back, and then he just drops out into the single back over into more of a spread, wide open formation, and you can get mismatches in the defense that way. So it's just, again, does this player work into what you're trying to do offensively or defensively? I think the Saints would be intrigued with somebody like a Peppers or a Samuel, someone who can do multiple things, or even the USC cornerback who can do kick returns as well as play cornerback. Just all kinds of things we could work with. The more flexible you are, the better it is for an offense like the Saints or a defense like what the Saints are trying to put together. So, rambling.
It's the quarterback in you, brother.
Yeah.
Matt, how can people follow you on all the social media outlets?
Well, I got Twitter, NFL Ulrich 17. I usually comment a lot on a lot of what's being posted about the draft and even some of the free agent pickings. I even do a couple mock drafts on Walter Football's Reader mock drafts. My latest one was posted, I think, Sunday night. It's pinned up to my Twitter profile. I'm also on Facebook, and that's really the only ways I want you guys to contact me.
Oh, how nice. How about you, Zach?
I can
Well, since the last time we talked, I got the Twitter going because you guys are making fun of me about it. So you can follow me at VetschZ09. That's VETSCHY, ZY, or EY, sorry. And you can follow me at profootballspot.com, Zachery.Vetsch. I will be putting up some articles as a draft review. I'd like to go over that. Unfortunately, I'm going to definitely be talking about the Seahawks, so you probably won't be interested in that. And you can also find me at Facebook at Zachery Vetsch, Zachery. You can find me there, and look forward to any comments on any articles you guys want to throw out there. Try to be nice if you can. If not, whatever, we'll roll with it.
That's all right. You know, my only hatred really is for the Cowboys and the Falcons. A lot of people are surprised I don't hate the Seahawks because of beast mode and the beatdowns we've been getting. But, you know, I kind of sympathize with the Seahawks. I know, but I kind of sympathize with.
Day, man.
I kind of sympathize with the Seahawks. I really do, because of the stuff we talked about earlier about them being a small market team that prior to 2012, no one really paid any attention to the Seattle Seahawks. And I get that. And that, you know, it always bothered me that it was always more important to talk about the major media market teams that, you know, that if you're a small market team, especially a small market team that's struggling, you don't exist in the NFL. And I'm very sensitive to that kind of stuff because, you know, for
you want the ultimate irony?
Yeah.
The ultimate irony. Had the Seahawks never switched from the AFC, they would be running the show right now.
You're right. You're right. If the Seahawks were still in the AFC West, imagine you're playing the Raiders twice a year. You're playing the Broncos. You're playing Kansas City twice a year.
Chiefs.
Yeah, you know, that is not.
If you were still in the AFC,
that is not.
You would be running the show.
That is not that intimidating of a league, of a conference.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, when Seattle first came into the league, I don't know how many people know this, but in 1976, Seattle was in the NFC West. The first time they were in the Saints division. They were with the Saints, the Rams, the 49ers, you know, and the Falcons. They moved them over to the AFC because you had both expansion teams in the NFC because Tampa Bay went straight to the NFC Central back then. And, we prior to 2011, us beating the Seattle Seahawks 51-14 or 21, something like that, and 78, I think, was the largest margin of Saints victory ever until we beat the Colts 62-7 in 2011. So,
oh well, good for you. You beat a 2-year-old.
I'm telling you, you're fighting with children. So
good one.
Woo!
Anyway, that's the history. That's the history there. Yeah.
Sorry.
But thank you guys.
Thank you guys very much for being part of us. And for all of our listeners, these are two of the guys that we plan on having our big draft special on April the 25th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. April 25th. We plan on having Zach and Matt both back as guests on that show. Thank you guys so much for being a part of our show, man.
Appreciate it. Hey, before I sign off, Sean, I wanted to let you know, man, you're not alone in the baldness category, brother. I got you.
Oh, crap. I took my hat off.
Yeah, you did. That's okay. I just did, too. So we're cool, man. I did, too.
Hey, yours come with your gig. Mine came with chemo.
That's true.
Zach, brother,
I'm doing it naturally. Man. So
appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Thank y'all for coming.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Zach.
All right, Matt. Thank you for being on tonight. And thank you guys for sticking with us. We went overtime. We went an hour and a half, and I was trying to stay within an hour and 15 minutes at least. Join us next week when we have an exciting show with Tyler, a really big show.
Big show.
See how many people try and figure out who that I just referenced with that one.
I know.
Well, join us next week when we talk about Tyler. We'll have Tyler, and we'll talk about the upcoming what new free agents they've signed. We'll talk some more about the draft. We'll try and focus more on the Saints rather than just the draft in general. And we'll talk some more about any trades they make. And who knows, by that time we might have Malcolm Butler on the team, and we have a $50 million contract to talk about.
Next week, we're going to go a lot more in depth with a little more information on these new Saints that we have in terms of the free agents that we've picked up.
No problem. No problem. Thank you guys again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys. We love you so much. Thank you for your support.